Good evening, everyone. Today is the greatest day humanity has ever known. We have the launch of Empire of the Undying Sun. And today we have two special guests joining us at the moment to celebrate. We have a man who knows his cool history, a guy who doesn't stop thinking, the commander of the Cloudbreaker Alliance, CJ. How are you?
Hello, hey everyone. Yeah, glad that you invited me, Zhao.
And we also have someone who I think will be familiar to many, a man who digs deep, delving deep, one might say, into dungeons, always getting into action and adventure. The Dungeon Delver.
Well, hello, Yang. How are you this evening, CJ?
I am
Yeah,
doing well, despite being sleepy.
Hey, man, no rest for the wicked.
um, so, Empire of the Undying Sun launched today. We're about $20 short of oh, we just got
oh,
another backer. Excellent. So we
Woohoo!
funded. We are
you're fun.
going
No,
for
hey,
it.
congrats.
Excellent, man.
All right, well, what a coincidence. I mean, we're just on, and that's it. Bam.
It's that
Perfect.
Dungeon Delver effect. Happens wherever I go, really.
So for anyone who doesn't know, Empire of the Undying Sun is a campaign guide spanning levels 1 to 10 for the fifth Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. It is a horror campaign, and not just modern, oh no, my tea ran cold horror. No, we are bringing back the feels of old school play, the danger, the stress and anxiety of running through various dungeons, hex crawls, murderous wizards, uh, crime syndicates, a theocratic state that has a god who demands blood. And Empire of the Undying Sun brings back a classic horror feel with modern mechanics, with some, uh, with a few additions. And just take a quick look if I can find the page. There we go. So we have 3 levels of support. We have a all digital, which will be the most cost effective for those who are outside of the US. You will get both the campaign guide and you will also get a player's guide because you are spending good money to get fantastic looking art. You don't want to just have that book and say, well, guys, I wish I could show you how awesome it is. No, you're going to show them how awesome it is. The player's guide will have all the information they need for the background of the world, for changes to character classes, to location guides, without giving away any secrets. The second tier is going to be a physical book. Uh, and with that book, you are also going to get the digital versions of the campaign guide and the player's guide. And in addition, you will get 12 adventure supplements. We are releasing those supplements once a month starting in November. These supplements are all set in the world of the Empire of the Undying Sun, but you could easily put them in your own campaign setting as well. And uh, some of them are written by me, but we also have special guests. For example, the Dungeon Delver has written 3 of these modules, which are meant to be about 3 to 6 hours of play. Something you could just pull out at the drop of a hat or have a special night with your friends. And the third level is a wooden carrying box where and DM screen made from oak or maple, and it's the perfect size to fit your player's handbook and at least one other official D&D book. It's got a spot for carrying your dice, minis, uh, dice tower, pencils, pens, whatever you need. And the DM screen itself is, of course, all wood. It stretches about 48 inches long, 10 inches tall, and it's got magnets, so it's easy to put up your DM notes. Just stick them up there. There's a have a metal bar that sticks that goes with each panel. Whew. So, gentlemen, after that long-winded introduction, let me ask you guys, what makes a good horror setting for tabletop role-playing games?
Mm. A setting.
Setting or a good horror game.
I guess. Well, this is not specifically about setting, but I think something really important that a lot of people don't pay attention to and missed out on is to create really good victims. Because you always need the right type of victim to just set the mood. What sort of like horror, what sort of pain or gore that can be experienced by the victim, so that the player or the viewers watching the horror film can pretty much imagine what will happen to them. Because the thing about horror is that it's great when you don't know exactly 100% what it is, but you also need to know the sort of danger it can present. So that's why we really need a really good victims.
Oh, that's a good point.
I agree wholeheartedly, CJ. I'm the antique here amongst the three of us, I think. And we in Gen X got our heads screwed with pretty badly when marketing execs said horror movie advertisements and just horror movies in general before the nightly watershed. Absolutely, it'll make them stronger. And let me tell you something about my generation. Every one of us at age 8 or 9 was a certified badass on the playground until the day after Danny Glick started scratching on that window. And if you know the scene I'm talking about, in Salem's Lot, the Toby Hooper version of Salem's Lot that aired on TV back in the day, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But what I think in retrospect really horrified us goes right straight to what CJ is saying, and that is victims. I mean, King, this wasn't the horrible Nosferatu looking Mr. Barlow that came out and got the kids in Salem Lot. It was a little boy. It was a little kid, and sitting and watching that now again as an adult, I'm like, how effective, how frightfully effective was King to write that, and then Toby Hooper to create that, because like right off the bat, it's like, well, surely nothing bad will happen to the kid, and the kid's floating outside the window, raking on it with his fingernails, wanting to be let in. And you go to the modern slasher film, poor PJ Souls in the original Halloween, same era, same generation, pretty girl having fun with her boyfriend, and and so many writers do that. And in a tabletop role-playing game, one of the most fun things you can do as a keeper, as they call it in Call of Cthulhu, is to create memorable NPCs. And if you can create sympathetic NPCs that everybody's rooting for, and they stand there and they tell you that all their hopes and and best wishes are relying on the party getting them out of this situation. And right before they begin the second stanza of their plea, they erupt in 50 gallons of green jelly because something horrible, came up through the floorboards and got them. I think that is really the pièce de résistance of a good horror scenario, whether in fiction or in tabletop, is, as CJ said, to create uh, sympathetic victims. You can go the other way and have like a real jerk, a real heel. I mean, um, one of Stephen King's complaints about the film version of The Shining. By the way, I think the film version of The Shining is brilliant. But was right off the bat, literally right off the bat, you knew that Jack Torrance was a POS, right? That he just oozed, I'm going to be horrible for this entire movie. So when you finally see him sitting in the hedge maze, frozen to death, and then that long pan down the hallway while the jazz music plays, and you see him trapped in the photo, he's now become a ghost of the Overlook. You don't feel anything but visceral satisfaction. But I don't think it's an even split. I think it is much more effective from a horror standpoint when you have a very sympathetic victim in a horror film. And I've blathered on too long. I'm sorry, Yang.
No, no, that was a great answer. Yeah, I think that's part of the challenge as keepers or dungeon masters or game masters or referees. Um, you sort of have to breathe a little bit of life into your setting, and you have to make it so that um, it can't all be bad, right? Like there has to be something that players want to save, something that they want to preserve.
Yeah, and I think there is also a matter of like, what's it called? What you consider to be a success in a horror campaign or even a horror module, because sometimes just running away or just surviving is not enough, and it would get to be really boring and annoying when their only way of survival is to just work against each other. You know you won't be having a really fun campaign. Everybody would be backstabbing each other, and it would only pretty much last for a session or two until the campaign ends. Or I mean, at least the group of players would just break apart. There is yeah. When it comes to betrayal, usually I just find that most players would just completely stop working with each other once betrayal is discovered. So usually it's better to be left to the end, or just find a different way of dealing with it.
Yeah, I think so. And one thing that people have told me over the years in different test groups and just friends who play is people often say, "I want to be the hero," and I think that even in horror, like for example, in Empire of the Undying Sun, in the fifth level, the town you start off in South Bay gets invaded by thousands of undead. There's really no practical way that you're going to fight them off, so you will have to retreat. But in the retreat, the players have the opportunity to save the townsfolk. They, a lot of them will have family there. They've just spent 5 levels of getting to know the NPCs and people they like and they don't like in the town. So they still have the chance to be the hero in, at least saving someone
Right.
instead of just, like you're saying, just getting kicked at every possible opportunity. They need like those small moments of victory in the face of overwhelming defeat.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. And I just think that sometimes uh, people seems to game Um, it's kind of funny to say gaming the game, because once somebody experiences a lingering effect, or their character is maimed or disfigured, whatever, they would sometimes just like let the character die, just reset pretty much. I think it would sometimes, the way to get around this to is to create some sort of a slow growing effect. So the consequence of that action is uh, only comes to fruit after a session or two, maybe like a few sessions, so that they are already invested in certain actions in a certain scenario. Then they feel the consequences of their past actions. That would get them to buy in a bit to the sort of like a scenario, I think.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's a big factor.
Mhm.
Um, the One of the things that I hear a lot is, there's complaints about storyline versus sandbox effect, but
Right.
I think that you can get people to commit to certain paths of action on their
Mhm.
own once they're invested, which makes it a lot easier for you as the DM to be
Mhm.
prepped, um,
Yeah.
to want to tackle, to make sure that everything is ready for them to go through this journey.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's right. And it also it pretty much is about the sort of like investment they want to put into the game, because depending on the group you're with, sometimes this is just your mates who just return after 10 hours of work on a Friday, and you're playing this game that's really mentally quite taxing. It depends on how much mental investment they can put into the campaign. And sometimes I'll just tell them, yeah, well, if you can't invest that much energy, maybe you can just be the recurring victim who gets killed, who get killed every time. So that would be pretty funny. And some of my friends do take up the offer, and they're having a bit of fun with it. Yeah. Yeah, I guess a lot of like tabletop RPG is also about negotiating and just like understanding. It requires quite a lot of like EQ besides of IQ, I guess. You need to
Yes.
manage expectations and do all that sort of stuff. All the things that uh, uh, people will pick up eventually, or something that you can't really teach in dungeon master guides or whatever guides.
Yeah, that is true. It's kind of funny because historically, tabletop gamers have been considered very like antisocial and lacking in social cues and whatnot.
Mhm.
But I kind of find that to be the exact opposite, because if you're a good player and you're in a good group, you have to know when you should speak up and take the lead, but not overstep on other people and their enjoyment of the game.
Right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I guess eventually you will build a group of people who you vibe with. But I used to run organized games for uh, Dungeons and Dragons, and also Call of Cthulhu. That was pretty short-lived, Call of Cthulhu one. Uh, when you are getting people coming in through the door of game shops, you wouldn't know what sort of character they are. And sometimes
Mhm.
I have some players who are pretty much uh, uh, griefer, pretty much, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, they're joining the game so that they can just grief other people. Um, Sometimes you have to manage that sort of thing a bit, and it's easier to grief strangers. That's
Mm.
why.
Uh, That's kind of interesting you say that, because I would think that, like on virtual tabletops, it seems very easy
Yeah.
when you don't have a camera, it's just voice. But I'm kind of surprised people would do that to in-person games, because it takes something more to do
Mm,
that to someone's face.
right.
What about you, Dungeon Delver? Have you ever had that kind of issue when you're running games?
I haven't myself, but honestly, the trope of that guy is as old as tabletop gaming. Now, and I don't mean role playing games. I mean it is as old as tabletop gaming. I mean, you go back and look at you know, I'm sure there are guys who would grief fellow players in Avalon Hill's Gettysburg, and that came out in 1958. Certainly in Diplomacy, which came out in I think the mid 1960s. I mean, that's a game that's built around the process of griefing people. But when it comes to to RPGs, I mean, the hobby is unfortunately a litany of it, and I think it is partially because it stems from a wargaming background. I mean, you know, my OD&D sets both refer to themselves as wargaming, you know, primarily. Which that's not to say you can't role play in them, quite the contrary. But you know, it's a little known fact that clerics were added to Dungeons and Dragons because a player got bit by a vampire, became a vampire, started calling himself Sir Fang, and the rules were so fast and loose at the time that, you know, vampires, you know, they were inspired by Christopher Lee, Bela Lugosi, and could gaze and hypnotize. And the player running the vampire was essentially griefing everybody in the game. I'm going to hypnotize Dave's character. Okay, Dave, give me a save versus spells. I failed. Okay, what do? I make him give me his treasure, you know? And finally, the players got fed up with it, and they had just seen, I think, the Witchfinder General with Peter Cushing. And they went to, I can't remember if this was at Gary's table or if this was at Dave Arneson's table, but they said, look, we've had it with this guy. Give us a character class that can do something to undead. And the cleric was invented as a control rod against a griefing player. And that shows that it is really ultimately incumbent on the game master to meter their games and to stop griefers from ruining people's games, because the unfortunate reality is, you know, just as there are people who will find exploits in online shooters and use them, you know, and that's their idea of fun. It does. They get no fun from racking up the wins. That's certainly a nice effect. Where they get their fun is watching people become more and more frustrated and quit. Ruining the fun of other people brings them in enjoyment. And with regard to tabletop games, unfortunately, I think it's probably a lot less toxic than, say, a Call of Duty lobby. But you know, I anything is the inside of reactor 3 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant is less toxic than a Call of Duty lobby. But I think there are people that's just how they get their jollies. The good thing is, generally speaking, not many people are willing to put in the effort these days to do the long play where they'll spend the length of a campaign befriending people, at least becoming chummy enough with them to then completely wreck things. And you know, because they'll burn down multiple relationships with people, but you're still going to have your gaggle of asocial misfits. And you know, it's up to you as the DM to just collar them and take them aside and say, look, you know, I said that kind of behavior wouldn't be tolerated. If you're working through something, if you got something going on and you want to take a few minutes to take a deep breath and remember we're all here to have fun, that's fine. But if this is your play style, doesn't really fit my table. And that's what my character would do, is no excuse. So I think, yes, there are griefers in tabletop, but they're probably a little bit more easily dealt with, because they will out themselves, and you'll just be able to say, yeah, I know what you're here for, and then invoke Rock's Fall, everybody dies, or Rock's Fall, your character dies, the Gygax rule.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Yeah, well, but sometimes I think, with your horror setting, I think, it's possible to just kind of like direct the fear and pretty much get the players to work together against the game master a bit. Or I think, it's uh, I do pull out a bit of a mean streak as a game master or dungeon master, because it pretty much gets the players to work together against me. That's part of the plan. Uh, but as long as I stay reliable, being a fair game master, that's all I needed to do pretty much. Um, just create a situation where it's going to be a bit more fun for the players to work together. And I do think that even if them, sometimes some players do prefer to uh, stay at the back, those supportive sort of characters. I just try to find a way for them to uh, get something to do at least, just even to support their friends, pretty much.
Sure. And, in a horror game, it's that kind of character that's going to live the longest, because remember, you don't have to outrun the nameless horror. You just have to outrun everyone else in the party. And if you start at the back, if you start at the back, you've got a better chance than anyone else.
Right. Right. Can you tell us a bit more about the monsters you have in your Kickstarter campaign, Intel?
Yes. So, well, first of all, the campaign is compatible with 5e 2014 and 2024. So you can always add any of the monsters from the monster manuals from there. But we use different kinds of horror at different spots. So in the beginning, it's kind of a slow roll. And the first couple of chapters are a little bit more traditional D&D-ish, where it's more like factions. There's not a lot of supernatural. In fact, you're not going to find in the beginning levels goblins, orcs, or any of those classic tropes. You're going to find cultists. You're going to find criminal syndicates. There's a god who's inspiring elves to try to rebel against the local government, which, depending on your point of view, might be a good thing or a bad thing. But then something strange starts happening where all these animals, uh, they're just finding horses all over the place that have been completely gutted, their intestines ripped out. And we come to find out that something that should not be in the world was somehow let in through barriers that protect it. And we start to get sort of to the B story of the game, which is what these wizards have been up to. And we find that a demonic soul is able to come into our world and is now trying to murder a lot of people and bring more of its kind in. So you have like horrors from beyond. And as you progress, you find that there are more horrors left in the world that people sort of didn't realize they exist on the margins. You'll find magic users and hags. You'll find uh, were rats, and eventually um, these barriers start to break down and things come in, and you end up with all sorts of undead hordes. and monsters of legend that people had thought didn't exist. So you have to find and escape them, and eventually you end up in a pyramid that you have to reconfigure, sort of like a Rubik's cube, to either completely break down the walls of the world or to patch them up forever. And in that's the area where you find all these other creatures that come that you would more see, but they're all a little different. So by the time you're level 9 and you're in this pyramid, you come across some goblins, and you think, "Oh, goblins, how cute!" Except they swarm you like piranha, and they're flesh eating, and they'll just strip all the meat from your bones in
So like
seconds.
proper goblins should be.
Yeah.
Exactly, but more swarming. Um, yeah, so I try to take the monsters, and I give them a little twist. So
Mhm.
they're all a little different than classic D&D monsters. There's a lot of monsters who pose as people. They're
Okay.
trying to find a certain object to break down these walls of the world, and yeah, and there's a lot of shapeshifters. There's a part where the party will probably sail across the ocean,
Mhm.
and you think you've escaped from this undead horde, but you come to find out somebody is slowly murdering people on this ship, and you're kind of stuck in the middle of the ocean, and you have to figure out what's going on. So there are many different kinds of monsters that act in different ways. I don't want to give too much away, but sort of it's how would I say? Although the campaign guide itself does have a sort of moral direction to it,
Mhm.
players are welcome to run an evil campaign if they want. They can be completely neutral. So
Mhm.
how they interact with these creatures, and sort of whether they become monsters themselves,
Mhm.
are it's really up to the direction that they want to take things. Um,
Mhm.
one thing that this campaign guide has, it um, once you get a couple levels in, you start to find out more about the gods of the world, and they start to contact you, and they want you to do certain things for them, and you kind of start to realize you very well might be on the path to becoming a demigod or a god yourselves.
Mhm.
So what does that do to someone,
Mhm.
when they have like cultish followers, like groupies basically, who want to follow them around. And then I also have a play mechanic for the dream realm. I was
Mhm.
never very satisfied with the traditional astral realm in
Right.
D&D. It was just kind of like another place.
Right.
So I have sort of replaced it with the dream realm, which is every night when you go to sleep, you go to the dream realm, but you generally don't remember what happened. But when you're there, you're actually interacting with other people as they sleep. Gods can contact you there, and they will often give you prophetic dreams or tell you exactly what they want. But there's also the possibility of nightmares. And when you have
Mhm.
nightmares, it's some creature in the dreams is attacking you.
Mhm.
So it's set
Right.
up sort of like you could have Freddy Krueger, or
Oh,
if
yeah.
your players were smart enough, they could be somebody else's Freddy Krueger.
Right, yeah, that would be
Um,
really cool actually. That's something I really like. If you kind of like figure out the rules, you can just play it against the enemy. That's really peak sort of like role playing, peak tabletop RPG pretty much. So you are really not limited to whatever is programmed for
mhm.
you, like in video games. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole campaign guide, even though it's a setting, it's sort of different than a lot of guides
Mhm.
because there's a strict calendaring system.
Okay.
It's not like one-to-one time or anything, but certain events will happen on certain dates.
Mhm.
So, for example, between the chapter 1 and chapter 2, I think there's 3 months. Between 2 and 3, there's 2 months, and 3 and 4, there's 2 months. So, you as the DM, you can keep playing and have your players, have all sorts of other adventures that aren't necessarily along that storyline. Or you could even, if they say, it's boring, I'm not interested, they could do something else and skip out of the main storyline and jump in later. But if they're not doing that thing, another adventuring party will. So, for example, in the second chapter, there's cults attack the town and try to kill a bunch of the town guard. And then later, you should track them down into the forest where you find this creature that has been summoned that shouldn't be able to be summoned. If your players aren't interested in going on that quest line, you can have them do something else, but some other party of NPCs in the background will do this, and so certain things will happen. So I try to bridge the gap between sandbox and something that's on rails. So I wanted to make something where if you as the DM ran this game more than once, it would be different every time,
Right.
just based on your characters or your players' choices.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and I guess with this sort of like horror games, sometimes the monsters are really great. Some I kind of like prefer to show my players the monsters first because so that they will know which monster they want to be killed with because it's just like you said with those like nibbling goblins. I think it would be really embarrassing if they get killed by nibbling goblins. At least they want to find the cool monster, at least get killed by that instead of something embarrassing like goblins.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, that's a bit of like a meta gaming that I would allow my players to do.
Well, you're talking about cool monsters, and I've been sitting here fidgeting for like the whole time. Yeah, can I talk a little bit about Fairy Mound?
Of course.
If I okay. So what one of my secret shames is when I pen Dungeons and Dragons adventures, every once in a while I like to throw a little bit of saccharin in there and sweeten things up, right? And when Yang started bouncing ideas off of me for the trio of modules for Undying Sun, I said, when I looked at this, and we talked about the tropes in the game, this is not just like, Control C, Control V from Dungeons and Dragons, where it's like, okay, we got orcs, goblins, hobgoblins, ogres, giants versus elves, dwarves, humans, half elves, half orcs, halflings, gnomes, go. So I got to kind of play with things a little bit in thinking about a different approach, a darker, like if you go and you read Grimm's fairy tales, I don't think either one of you gentlemen will disagree. There's Grimm's fairy tales, the way they were originally written, there's a lot of them that are just straight up horror stories, right? It's like, no, the little kids didn't escape the witch. She ate them. The end. That's it. The end. They're dead. Good night, kids. So my introduction to elves was originally the Rankin Bass, well, not counting the Rankin Bass Christmas shows with Santa's elves, but when I really started thinking about elves, it was with the Rankin Bass, The Hobbit, and then immediately after that came out, like the week that came out, my aunt gave me a copy of The Hobbit to read, and I loved both versions. But Thranduil and the elves of Mirkwood are not nice people in The Hobbit. I mean, he shows up at the Lonely Mountain. Granted, the humans do too, but he shows up at the Lonely Mountain and is like, that's ours. Come on. You guys broke out of jail in our forest. And I mean, from our perspective, granted, Tolkien, he expanded his world beyond in writing the Lord of the Rings, but Mirkwood, it's right there on the tin. Mirkwood, it's not a happy place. It's not an enchanted forest. It's as far as we know, there's the necromancer living in the far south, and the rest of the place is populated with horrible spiders. And the elves apparently live amongst this and do a little bit of business with the men of Dale. So then, even after I read the Lord of the Rings, and he kind of fleshed it out a little bit more fully and so on, he kind of mended that with Gimli and so on. But with I remember grabbing a book as we were at Goodwill. I wanted just some fantasy that I didn't have my set of Lord of the Rings in the state with me. We went to Goodwill and I grabbed a book about it was fantasy stories, but it was fantasy stories from like the 1910s, which at that time was 70 years prior, before Tolkien, before the noble angelic elves of any other literature. And these elves and fairies and sprites were mean sons of bitches, It's like, hey, why don't you come party down with us? Don't sit over there on the riverbank. Absolutely, I'll go in. Oh, what a great night partying. Yeah, you've been here 120 years. Wait, I've what? Shove. Instant age. Your grandchildren find you as a withered husk on the riverbank where you disappeared a century ago, that sort of thing. They're stealing children. And so when Yang and I started talking about what to do with that adventure, I leaned away from the Sylvan elf, from the Tolkien elf, and I leaned heavily into the mischievous forest spirit elves, which there is kind of a return to that in the quicklings in AD&D. I don't know if they came in other versions of D&D, and of course you had of course famously the Drow elves and so on. But I had a lot of fun going with kind of a darker, these are children stealing wood spirits that you leave a baked cake outside your house and then nail your door shut during a full moon and just hope for the best when these elves come visiting, not hang a stocking and hope that they leave a nice treat for you. So it was fun casting them in that light and creating what I think is a more something that fit Empire of the Undying Sun a lot better than the Raphaelite sort of I got this calendar for mom and it's a picture of pixies dancing in a circle kind of thing.
Yes. And just as an aside, something interesting I did not realize until I was recently throwing it into layouts to get it ready for publication, is that there are no fairies in the D&D 5e monster manual. So I just had to construct some stat plots for them.
I think there are pixies and sprites, but
pixies and sprites, but no fairies.
All right. Okay. Cool. I thought I'm not sure how does D&D treat it? Is it there are some sort of like a genus subspecies? I'm not sure.
That's a good question. They're at least pretty darn close to what you would think of pixies, but it seems like they're different at different times. I think in older versions there weren't there difference between fairies and pixies, Dungeon Delver?
So there are no per se fairies as they go. I would say probably the closest you would get to, again, that sort of Raphaelite style artwork, that sort of Baroque butterfly winged fairy would be probably the sylph in first edition AD&D. But there are pixies, there are sprites, And of course, there's leprechauns. And as I was mentioning, there are quicklings in first edition AD&D, all of which you could just as easily say, okay, sprites, no, they're fairies, because sprites are also winged creatures. So it's literally just peel this off and stick that back on, and you can change them around. But if you're going for evil, then quicklings are pre-made, and they can be quite bothersome to the to the unwary. But I think Yang, when I started talking about Fairy Hill and these are going to be fairies, I hope I didn't put you too much on your back foot with that, making you come up with a whole new monster for your
No, it
campaign that
was
you weren't
great.
expecting.
Well, no. So after the OGL debacle, I just regularly change all the monsters, anyways, just so Wizards of the Coast can't come in and claim I'm ruining their copyright.
Mhm.
But also, just as a function of how people play games. I think that it's like CJ was saying earlier. I hear from a lot of people, like they come home, they don't really have a whole lot of time for prep. They just want to play something to relax. So as much as possible, I try to I want to
Yes.
put all the stat blocks like right in the back, so you
Yeah.
have something to flip to.
Mhm.
Um, in all the adventure supplements, as well
Mhm.
as the campaign guide. So I don't. I, it's fine to have monster manuals and this and that, but I think it's easier for people and more enjoyable just to be able to whip the book out and here we go.
Yep. Yeah. I think what you're doing is really perfect, because a lot of the time is that people love to imagine, but the thing is they're too busy to imagine. That's I think that this is why campaign books and your guides are really useful, because it's pretty much even like with my own games or whatever, what we are trying to give the people are really the cake mix or the ramen pack for them to build something out of. Even if they don't like the sauce that's part of the package, they have something that's half done, and they just can just add something to it. It's pretty much they're buying convenience, really,
Mhm.
from us. Yeah, because we really can't say that these people don't have any imagination, but because the players do have a lot of imagination. It's just that sometimes they don't have the chance to use it.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I even from Wizards of the Coast, I've seen
Mhm.
some modules that were, you really have to stick with
Mhm.
whatever the story is. It's not flexible,
Right.
or they'll have something where you have to look in five other books to get the information you need to run something.
Mhm.
And just as a just as the mechanics of designing a game to be played, I just don't like that. I think that people should always have what they need.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I guess it's sometimes even go as far as creating mnemonics for the players to
Mhm.
remember certain factions more easily and things like that. Memory tricks. I have to like open up all this memorization tricks, whatever that used when I was a instructor teaching certain skills. So I just go back to pedagogy. That goes into part of the design of the books and so on.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So, CJ, you have your own game that's it's been out for about a year. You've been doing a lot of fine tuning. Why don't you give us the
Oh,
30,000 foot overview of Cloudbreaker Alliance?
right. Thanks. Okay. Well, I've designed a game. It's called Cloudbreaker Alliance. It's pretty much a just you can kind of imagine it as sort of like alternative way of success. So what happens is that in Cloudbreaker Alliance, all monsters can be neutralized rather than be defeated by reducing their hit points to zero. If you're fighting some mechanical monsters, you can use your mechanics kits and dismantle them. It's harder to dismantle them when they're at full health, of course, full HP. But once they are faltering, it makes it easier. And also, most enemy groups have their morale. So if you are clever enough to manipulate the situation until they lose all their morale, you pretty much win the combat or whatever the situation is. Because we what I'm trying to do is to go in a bit more into a creative problem solving. It's also a bit of like a Sun Tzu sort of thing. The best battle is best war is won without fighting, and if you can just find a way to manipulate the situation to your advantage, you win. And this is also why the monsters don't have any experience points. You just do your job. Whatever you do, the more efficient you're at it, the better it is. You get all the rewards anyway. And it is also what can you say? It encourages a bit of more of a problem, a bit of a mystery solving. It encourages mystery solving in the missions, because what happens is that you have a lot of toolkits in this game, because characters have their personal skills, of course. Lots of like tabletop RPGs have that. But on top of that, we have toolkits, so that if you go into a mission, even if you don't have the right build, whatever, you can solve the missions with the right toolkits. It's almost like an alternative to skills.
Mhm.
So you're encouraged to interview people. You're encouraged to investigate the situation and bring the right toolkits to solve the problems. And you also have to think laterally, because for example, there's a skill called brutes or brute strength. You can push, pull, and do like muscle man stuff with it, the pretty much action hero stuff. But using your toolkits, you need a climbing kit which has a rope and pulley you can use to pull stuff. But if you want to push things, you need the universal jack inside your mechanics kit. So you have to think like, what should I bring to this situation? And it's also our like a mission design principle is based on the fair play whodunits sort of like convention, like Agatha Christie or Honkaku mysteries in Japan.
Hmm.
So Japan was really big on this sort of like mystery novels, even back pre Second World War and throughout
Yes.
post war. And it also became a battle convention, becomes a ninja convention, because one of the Futaro Yamada, he was a really prolific novelist. He started out as a mystery novel writer. He won a few awards. After that, he think that, you know what, I would start writing ninja fictions. So this is how he started. Like in his ninja fictions, it's like between two clans, as they have each clan have their special abilities, and they have to like figure out what their special abilities are, use traps or whatever to figure out their weaknesses and defeat them that way. So this is pretty much inspired by those sort of like mystery and ninja fiction conventions. Right, and
Yeah.
this is pretty much descended into their mangas too. Like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure used this a lot,
Mhm.
compared to the Dragon Ball, more of a muscle man fighting stuff. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty much the basis.
Hmm. That's very interesting, a very different approach.
Mhm.
Would you say that the play mechanics of Cloudbreaker is like specifically geared towards the mystery solving, or do you think that this approach could work in sort of most tabletop settings?
In most tabletop setting, it will work because we do have a robust combat system. And we are using a system. Uh, this is We are using only 2d6s. We are making the rolling really simple. It's a one roll resolution. So with just one roll, you can calculate whether the attack hits and how much damage it does. And the complexity comes in the spirit token acquisition. So um, at every turn, you gain spirit tokens. It's pretty much, you can compare it to a superpower that lets you unleash a special, really powerful abilities.
Hmm.
But the thing is, if you reduce the enemy's morale, you also receive that morale as your spirit token. So you are building up momentum as the combat goes along. Of course, it goes. Pretty much the combat is built in the favor of players, but it pretty much simulates the 4-act story structure used in Asian storytelling or like in mangas, whatever, the Kisho Tenketsu. So there is a starting point, developments, and then the twist. The twist doesn't mean that it's something that's unexpected. It could be. Doesn't mean that something bad. It could be something that goes incredibly well towards your favor. You unleash your special ability and you win. Or sometimes the enemy unleashes their special ability and you're in deep trouble. So it just creates a sort of like an expectation that something big will happen. So it just pretty much bakes in that you are going to feel that something big is going to happen in whatever situation you're in. That sort of stuff.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, and the enemy morale becoming your resource. It's partly inspired by shogi, the Japanese chess,
Mhm.
because in shogi, when you capture the enemy pieces, you are recruiting them. You can play them on your side. So that sort of stuff.
Hmm. Interesting. Uh, Dungeon Delver, in your many
Yeah.
years of experience, how what would you say the ratio is of players who like to solve mysteries versus people who just like to punch stuff?
Um, I feel like it's an even split, and the Venn diagram crossover is huge. I've never met a player who was just like, look, I don't want to worry about this. I just, can't you just tell us that, like, oh, it comes to me in the in a dream or something, and then we can move on. I mean, there's a lot of quote unquote D&D horror stories about players who are like that, but I can't say as I've ever encountered any. Um, I think things like convention settings lend themselves hard to one or the other because um and a lot of times there's things that you can think just on the face of it, it is the simplest it's literally all they have to do is flip the letters and rotate them 13 characters to the left, and they can figure it out. Why is it taking them so long to figure this out? um so I think it also depends on how even-handed a DM is with the creation of the puzzles and whatnot. But to directly answer your question, I think it's about even. um you know and the beauty of a good role-playing system, and a well game master role-playing system is you'll give both a time to breathe. You'll give you know the people who can solve a logarithm, 4-digit logarithm in their head, a chance to open the vault door. And then there's the guy who's just got a hot hand with a D20, You know, he's got his +3 intelligent longsword. He's got his shield with the symbol of pain on it, and all he wants to do is wade into that bunch of hill giants and go to town. You know, a good game master will give both of those player types a chance to shine. And again, I found that it is it's really an even split almost, with a huge amount of crossover.
Yeah. Or at least find a way to fool your more of a like a brawny roll to attack players, to fool them into thinking that they are really clever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the most fun as a game master can be, regardless of what system you're playing, is presenting the players with a scenario and letting them think they've gotten the best of you. You
Right.
know,
Yeah. Exactly.
one of the most hilarious things, I cannot tell this with the same aplomb that Paul Stormberg talks about, the Giant's Bag gambit. It's a great Gygaxian gambit where you try to convince the players that they've really gotten one over on you, and when they've in fact not gotten anything over on you. And the Giant's Bag refers to a hill giant who has fled his nasty evil cousins, and he stole a magic bag, and it only opens at night, and it must be something really powerful, and he'll trade it to the party for just a few coins. And a good DM can really lean heavily into that role play and get the party to give up some stuff to the hill giant so he can flee and do no harm to the company of men and that sort of thing. And it turns out the bag only opens at night, and it's full of hill giant excrement. That's a famous Gygaxian gambit, and that's the kind of thing, you extend it, and your party's like, this must be like a bag of holding. Look how easy he's carrying it. Oh yeah, guys, you win. I'll just take a few coins and bye. And night comes, the bag opens.
It reminds me of a recent incident for one of my playtest groups. There's a part where you're in a foreign country and a trial's being had, and your players are they're recruited basically by the emperor to figure out what happened, and it's their benefactor who's on trial. So there's a part where just the rules of the trial and how it works are being explained to them by this woman who's sort of the head prosecutor. So for some reason, head prosecutor didn't ring any bells for my players. So they decided to start planning their trial strategy. And their trial strategy was to slander one of the other witnesses. And they're like talking about it right in front of her. And at one point, one of the players said to her, like, "Oh, are we bothering you?" As she's like getting ready to go up to the trial, she's like, "No, go ahead, keep on." And hilarity ensued for me.
Right. Yeah. I guess it really depends on whether you get a really good group or not, who are into this sort of like role playing and things. Because sometimes when I run groups for younger audiences, I think you have to make things a lot simpler for them. And I guess I have to discount the mystery and the complexity of a lot of stuff.
When you say younger, how younger is younger?
Teens, maybe like 14, or because I do a lot of like convention sort of like volunteering. Sometimes you have to like just pretty much actually tell them what they exactly needs to do, because doing exactly as they are told can be very difficult. So yeah,
Yeah.
you don't have to like even give them
Oh,
any mystery. Tell them the obvious and see if they can actually do it. Right. Yeah.
That's, that's one of those things that I kind of wonder about as we're going forward. In we of course have the old school play style, which I try to bring back with this campaign guide. We
Yeah.
have more, there's the stereotype of the D&D uh, barista module,
Right.
where you know theoretically younger players want to pretend to have a job, I guess.
Right.
um, so but it makes me wonder, in the different generations,
Mhm.
are they looking for different things in games, or is it more like maybe younger people don't interact with mysteries as well, because they haven't consumed as many stories, TV,
Mm.
movie, books as older people have. So
Yeah.
therefore, it's easier for us to have a point of reference to engage
Yeah.
them with.
Well, in my opinion, yes, it is a really big issue because most people are watching TV or whatever really passively. And nowadays, with all the short videos, TikToks, and various YouTube shorts, they have really short attention span. And a while ago, they had uh, even, I mean, nowadays, mystery sort of like fiction isn't that popular either. It was until a while ago when they had that Sherlock on
Oh yeah.
from BBC. And when was the last time we have a really good mysteries related TV series or media? They had, because back then they had Columbo or like Magnum PI or whatever.
Mhm.
All these are mystery related, mystery solving related fiction. But we are just having less and less of that. And even with the newer uh, what's it called, the Game of Thrones
Uh-huh.
side stories and spin-offs, it's really just I don't think there are that much mysteries with them. They're really just one shocking scene to another. Yeah, string
Pretty
of
much.
scenes. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And you've hit on a couple of things there. First of all, mentioning a couple of my favorite TV shows. Again, I should be put in a poly bag and stored someplace out of the sun, because I'm so old and vintage. But you were talking about Magnum PI, Columbo, a couple of
Mhm.
favorites of mine. And there's, Rockford Files, Simon and Simon, Mrs. Columbo. We could
Mhm.
be here all night.
Right.
But even non-mystery genre shows back then
Mhm.
fit mysteries into things. I mean, maybe not as much skullduggery, but certainly, you look at Star Trek.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, what is doing this? What is draining all the salt out of the crew members? What is why did this planet disappear, and that sort of thing. And it kind of left a puzzle for the viewers to they then Murder She Wrote, another
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah.
um Although I will say that per capita, Cabot Cove is more dangerous than like Baltimore in
It's
terms of
horrific.
numbers of homicides. Don't move to Cabot Cove, Maine. My God, stay in Chicago. But
And I mean, there's no way she wouldn't be suspect number one in every single murder that happened. No one is accidentally around that many murders,
oh
even
yeah,
cops.
God no. Yeah. I mean, it's, I just I think Jessica has a uh not in the way it's modernly meant, but body count higher than just about anybody else. But anyway, to get back to the mystery aspect of things, and you're absolutely right, CJ. We don't do that now.
Right.
There is no sense of who done it. I mean, it may be a who done it for the characters, but
Mhm.
we the viewers are shown exactly everything that's going to happen, usually in the cold open. You
Yeah.
know, it's like there's no question. There are some exceptions. My wife was a huge fan, or she is, even though the series has ended, a huge fan of the show Bones
Bones. Oh
with
yeah.
David Boreanaz. He's married to the forensic pathologist that works for the Smithsonian, and that one will oftentimes throw mystery curves at you. It's not quite on the nose, but no, I think by and large you're right. I think we do have a decided lack of playing people's playing with people's gray matter a
Right.
little bit to make them wonder, ooh, who done it?
Right. Yes, and sometimes you have to teach them how logic works. For some of those younger people, uh, yeah, it's yeah. Sometimes you have to like teach them the procedure, how to discern a certain premise, and if certain like testimonies can be trusted or not. It's like you have to like go through all the steps with them to actually teach them how to be a good investigator in the mission itself or in the scenario itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, to be honest, even some people who are even some adults have issues with that because they have never like actually uh, interacted with any of these sort of like media, mystery or detective fictions and so on.
Oh yeah, you
Yeah.
ain't wrong. You are definitely not wrong about that. And I it can be a bit of a task for uh a DM, a game master, a keeper, as they say in Call of Cthulhu. I just wanted to pop that up. You have almost doubled your goal there, Yang, this
Nice.
Woohoo!
evening.
All
So
right.
good on you, man. That is
Thank you.
that's good numbers, brother. But no, a lot of time it's particularly if you're bringing somebody over from a genre, like if they've played strictly supers or strictly dungeon crawls, and then now you're just throwing it into a different gear and you're playing
Mhm.
Call of Cthulhu or Chill or something like that. You've got to say no. You can't punch the the ancient book and make it go away. You've got to figure, why are there 6 pages missing? Who made them disappear? And fortunately, you can get pretty good mechanics even for the folks who do, they get stuck. You can fall back on, can I make an occult knowledge roll,
Mhm.
so in role-playing games, you get a little bit better. You get a little bit better than, say, an author. In a role-playing game, you have a die roll that you can use versus an author. Their only recourse, or the reader's only recourse, because they can't have a dialogue with the author
Mhm.
to get hints, as it were, is to just flip to the back of the book and go, oh, it was the doctor. Okay, all right, that makes sense, and then try to go back and enjoy the rest of the book.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's I do think that the inclusion of mysteries, especially in a horror genre,
yeah.
really tends to make things well. It's one things I tried to do with Empire of the Undying Sun. Um,
Mhm.
there's a lot of mysteries which I kind of wanted to make it seem in the beginning like, oh, it's kind of normal Dungeons and Dragons y type adventures, and
Mhm.
then later on you sort of have, like, at first you don't have enough pieces of the puzzle to realize that there is a puzzle, but then
Mhm.
after a while you're like, oh, wait a minute, have we been responsible for a lot of these things? Are we, have we met some of these people who are, responsible for the dead coming back to life, or some of the other atrocities that they've seen, and then by the end, you have enough pieces to put the puzzle together and decide what you want to do with it. For me, those are always the most engaging types of games
Mhm.
where, even, of course, you want some fighting, you want some action, you want to get some loot, but something that kind of engages you, connects you to the world and the events that are going on, has always been the kind of games that I like to play.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And I guess it also goes into the reason why people like lores and bestiaries, so they pretty much guess what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's, I guess I think it's really important to make them to kind of like connect the lore and the bestiaries to what they are what they will expect to encounter, because maybe this is a bit of a male sort of thing, because this is just like how my brother, he's really into fishing. He's really into reading the books about like on fishes, where to fish, and even though it's quite unlikely that he would ever go to certain regions of the world, all the way to Argentina to fish some sort of like really rare fish, but he just really loved reading about it. So, and it's pretty much like how we want to read books on monsters, so that we know how to kill them. It's a bit of like a male sort of like preoccupation in sticking sharp things into dangerous stuff. Yeah, it's I guess it's this is also why it's, I think a lot of like bestiary that don't have enough instruction on how to defeat certain monsters. I think that would really help a lot, because people really love that. How do I defeat this monster, and so on, blah blah.
Well, I think it depends on the bestiary. There are a great many indications, and I'm going to be honest. I don't know if Yang told you about me. I mean, I stick strictly to classic D&D, and there's a lot of entries in the monster manual, and then there are clarifications in the Dungeon Master's Guide that'll say, this thing is very susceptible to fire. It can't tolerate daylight. A power word kill spell will stun it, and then it can be killed with normal weapons, so on and etc. But again, perhaps modern D&D and modern RPGs don't do that. I haven't looked.
Right.
Even when Yang came to me and said, "I need you to write 5e stuff," I said, "I'm going to write 1e stuff, and you can convert it, okay?" And that's the approach. That's the approach I've always taken. All of my editors, anyone I've worked for, I've just said, "Look, I have a design document. It's the first edition AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide.
Right.
It's up to you to convert."
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and to me, like a bestiary is almost like another kind of mystery within the game. And one thing that I have noticed, it was like the Dungeon Delver was saying, when I've been in groups with people who have played before, it's like, oh, it's a troll. We got to get some torches, or use Scorching Ray or something like that. To me, it kind of like tampers down that excitement, of discovery. Especially on the first time they're encountering such a thing. But I mean, after that, for sure, allowing them access to the information they would have learned about that creature, or giving hints if how do you say, like, if you fought a baby dragon, which would be much more fightable, the adult dragon is going to have similar characteristics and perhaps similar weaknesses.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's something that needs to be balanced a bit. Because even with Cloudbreaker Alliance, a big part of the game is discovering what sort of monster it is, so that you can neutralize it to win more easily. And we do encourage players to remodel monsters, so that this looks like the razor shells, but why is it shining purple light? There must be something new about this. So it just kind of like brings it just gives something more to be curious about and get them to investigate it a bit more, because they need to be in the presence of the creature to analyze it to get information. But it might be too dangerous to do that, so they'll need to go around and gather clues, and that opens up room for role play pretty much. And I think part of the thing is that with bestiaries and ways on defeating monster, it just adds to the power fantasy of players. This is like
Mhm.
how players or readers who are into like Harry Potter or those kung fu novels,
Mhm.
they read about all the special attacks, and they teach you need to like step back, do something, or in Harry Potter's case, you need to say a certain spell words. It just like fuels their power fantasy. Hey, I can do this too. So I think this is what I'm also doing with the monsters. That hey, I know how to defeat these monsters. I feel
Mhm.
more powerful now. Uh, That's
Mm.
just that's just part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you were saying, that process of discovery is
Yeah.
one of the more important things that needs to be ingrained into a
Mhm.
good game.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Uh, so I was kind of wondering, for you guys, what is the best horror tabletop role playing game that you guys have ever played?
Call of Cthulhu. Uh, uh, Virtually any edition.
I have to agree.
Hmm.
And I don't just say that because I like Sandy Peterson and he comes on my show a lot. It's really um and any way you want to run it, if you want to run it straight, just like I am trying to creep my players out, if you want to run it goofy Scooby-Doo style, it is pitch perfect for the genre. It is um it is, to my opinion, uh as good at being a horror game as Dungeons and Dragons is at being a fantasy role-playing game. And you know how I love classic D&D, Yang. So that is the highest
High praise
possible
indeed.
praise. Yeah, that is
Mhm.
the highest possible praise I can I can think to give it. Sandy did such an amazing job setting the tone, the way he wrote in the rules, and it's so beautifully compatible across what, 6 editions. There was a sea change in the seventh, but it doesn't seem to have caused as much upset as other role-playing games rule changes did. But you know, I started. Do I have my fourth ed book? But I started with the fourth edition softback a couple of years ago. I picked up this absolutely glorious reissue of the white box from 1980.
Mhm.
Any of them are good, and it is it's just so good. It sets the tone for the 1920s and 30s so perfectly. I mean, you can certainly play a modern Call of Cthulhu game and use this as the foundation, but you've got a little bit more legwork to do. Um, that's it. That's my answer.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm kind of curious too. Now I've heard stories that Call of Cthulhu is super popular in Japan,
Yeah.
and that they actually set it in modern day Tokyo.
Mhm.
But for me, like that setting of like 1920s New
Mhm.
England is sort of like part of the horror and part of the charm.
Right. Mhm.
How much do you think that, like, would you say that Call of Cthulhu could work in virtually any kind of setting, or are there only like specific settings that trigger specific people?
Oh, I think it works in pretty much any setting because if you look at uh, some of the ones from Japan, I went to uh, some of the tabletop RPG shops over there. Yellow Submarine. If you ever want to go find your tabletop RPG stuff, you should go there in Japan. And it's just that the thing is it's really hard for Japanese to imagine what 1920s America is like. Maybe they have the their Japanese version, Taisho version, 1920s, with all their retro sort of like um, uh, those aesthetic, but even those are not as popular as the modern ones, because with the modern ones they have lots of other like horror uh, materials from Japan that they can incorporate into it, like Junji Ito stuff, which can be very easily incorporated into Call of Cthulhu. And there are also a lot of uh, aesthetics, a lot of women players, incredibly lots of women, female tabletop
Hmm.
RPG players in Japan play that. That is why they always have character arts of really beautiful, good-looking young people as part of their role play, sort of like NPCs and so on. And they do stream that sort of stuff in Japan as really good-looking manga characters. Um, the aesthetic is really important for them because they have pretty much given it a whole new makeover over there. There is a difference between the book itself and the culture because if you look at the book, it's pretty much the cover that we have, in the English version. But if you go to the Twitter or their sort of like websites, their social media where they organize all these Call of Cthulhu games, their sort of aesthetics is very modern, very chic, very fashionable. So it's become also a fashion thing, almost like Vampire the Masquerade. Well, where the fashion,
Okay,
yeah,
that
mm,
makes sense now.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, setting wise, to me, 1920s New England is automatically kind of creepy. But like,
Mhm.
I lived in Japan for 2.5 years, and I always think of it as like in technologically advanced, except for the fax machines, and like very clean, and like everywhere you go is safe. You could pass out drunk on the street, and you would actually wake up with all your belongings in the morning. So, like from that point of view, it makes it kind of uh um it
It's
makes it a little bit I say like hard for me to get into like a horror vibe with it. But now that you say that, I can see, closer to a mask, the
Vampire.
Vampire the Masquerade. Like, oh, okay, now that makes sense. Now that
Mm,
makes sense to me.
yeah, yeah. Mm. And I guess it really depends on the location. I had a while ago. I had a almost like a interview from various players from different parts of the world, from I think Poland and Japan, Philippines, or like other
Hmm.
countries. Is like their role play culture for the same game can be very different, and even the most popular games are different in different places. I think in Poland, Warhammer Fantasy is more popular than Dungeons and Dragons or that sort of medieval stuff. I
Hmm.
guess it really depends on what sort of aesthetic clicks with them. I think aesthetic is a bit can be really important when it comes to the game, not just the system.
Hmm. Interesting.
And
Uh,
even some of Cthulhu books in France, I think they reformat it and give it a lot of like French sort of like art stuff.
oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yes, the French version. They
Hmm.
change all the arts, a lot of the arts inside.
Very cool.
So Dungeon Delver,
Yes,
I
sir.
want to thank you for coming. I understand It is getting late for Florida.
It is. It is. I was on storm watch last night, and I'm gonna go lay me down. So
Well,
hey,
thank you very much for
CJ,
stopping by.
Yeah,
you're
yeah, of
quite
course.
welcome. CJ, it was a pleasure to meet you, my friend.
Yeah, right.
I definitely want to check out your game. Everybody, go contribute to Empire of the Undying Sun.
Mhm.
Get it while it's hot. I think you're up now to yeah, $840. Yeah, you have
Nice.
blown past it, my friend.
Yes,
Um,
and even more shocking,
Mhm.
somebody actually bought one of the wooden cases in GM screens.
Oh, wow.
Kick
Okay.
ass, man. Well, it's that Dungeon Delver effect. You know, you have me on your media, and that's just what's going to happen.
Of
Uh,
course.
all right, gentlemen, it has been a lot of fun, and I will talk to you all around the way. Take care.
See you, Bill.
Peace.
Oh, Michael Dale. Well, thank you very much for backing that. I will definitely sign it, and I will make sure it is extra fancy just for you. But I like the box myself. I have a prototype left,
Mhm.
but I gave the original finished version to a friend. Well, that's what happens when you leave dice in there. But it's a decent size.
Nice.
Sorry, get that out of there so it's not rattling around.
Mhm.
Do not.
All right. Should be interesting. So,
There you go.
where do you get the
Plenty
box?
big.
Did you build it yourself, or?
Yeah, I build it myself.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh,
so
incredible!
woodworking was a hobby
Right, right.
that I
Yeah.
didn't have much time to do for a few years, but getting back into it, I
Mhm.
used to take this guy with me to, when I would, it's hard to see with this camera, but I would take it with me when I would DM at stores,
Mhm.
local game shops, and people people seem to appreciate it. It's like almost like wearing a wizard hat. It's a sign of
Yeah,
authority in gaming circles.
yeah, yeah. You're right. And yeah, sometimes you do need that sort of like a pump and pizzazz to just impress people with your, yeah, with your high level of wizardry, pretty much. Uh,
Yeah, there's like in
mhm.
Taoism, there's this sense of
Mhm.
aspect of moral authority, and it's
Mhm. Yeah.
not like we would think in the West where like God says to you, "Thou shalt be a DM," but it's
Mhm.
more like because you've done something
Yeah.
before, you therefore have more moral authority, right? So like Bill
Yeah.
has been DMing since
Mhm.
1974, probably, so he has more
Yeah.
authority than me, but I would
Right.
have more moral authority than somebody who's just starting. But so something like that, it's like wearing a white lab coat if you're a doctor. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
he's
Yeah. That's
serious.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess it's sometimes you have to use all the tricks in the book, even
Hmm.
the dress up or whatever. And but even with tabletop RPGs, all this sort of stuff, I really love this merchandises and the stuff you can get from it because it's always so good to have like extra stuff. It's like I own more of this game when I can get all the merchandises. Like yeah, it's like a bit of like I think I'm not the only one. It's like there's an obsession with like having more of this stuff if you really like it. Mm.
Do you also have a crippling dice addiction?
Oh, I tried to quit. I tried to quit. Yeah, but I have more than I can show people. But yeah.
I had a friend of mine that I was playing in a long term campaign with.
Mhm.
He would buy new dice all the time, and it got so bad. Like he got laid off from his job,
Right.
and he like part time did wedding makeup as well, which is very
Right.
seasonal here.
Yeah.
Um, and it was the low season,
Mhm.
and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna back this Kickstarter where they're using real gemstones to
Yeah.
make dice," and
Right.
it was like $800 or something. We're like, "What's wrong with you? Don't you have ranks? Come on, man."
Right. Yeah.
Um, but I understand what you mean. It does make it more fun, right? And then when you get the
Yeah.
minis and you paint them
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. 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 I guess that's also part of the reason why I guess next month I'll just go. I don't know where. Just see, maybe look at some factories, possibly, just to
Oh,
see if there might be stuff that can be produced, because there are some really interesting like merchandises from Japan and all this sort of stuff. See if I can, if not replicate, or maybe create something better out of it, just to see
hmm.
what material is there, what material is available for me to work on.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I used to have a friend when I was living in China who that
Mhm.
was kind of his job was to find factories
Right.
and match them up with like foreigners who needed, a part for a
Mhm.
car or plastic attachment for something.
Right.
And he was telling me one time that he was doing it for a few toy companies.
Right.
Um, so I and now this was like 20 years ago almost, but
Right.
um, I guess that if you know how to get in touch with the factories over
Mhm.
there, at least, you can get some really good stuff at very good prices.
Mhm. Right. Interesting. Yeah. I guess I'll try to do that, because um, something that I didn't expect, even like Beyblade, it was
Mhm.
something very uh, kid oriented, younger demographic oriented, but suddenly that sort of thing becomes somewhat a bit of a cult. It has a bit of a cult following among people in their 20s to 30s now.
Yeah, and it's interesting talking about younger people again. I kind of wonder,
Yeah.
um, sort of where we're going with tabletop role playing games.
Yeah.
Like, um, I in some ways I can't tell if it's a situation like the comic book industry
Mhm.
where no young people read Western comic books over here anymore,
Mhm.
despite the fact that the U.S. was the birthplace of them for
That's right.
for Western culture,
Mhm.
um, and a lot of that has to do with because the younger people were never um, they stopped selling them at local stores, and you had to go to a comic book specific store. So there's been 1 to 2 generations of younger people who never really had them,
Mhm.
like I had them when I was young.
Right.
And it kind of makes me wonder somewhat about the
Mhm.
role playing games too. Is
Right.
they go through cycles, and since there was such a big upswing, probably since 2015 when you had shows like Critical Role and Acquisitions Inc. really
Yep.
taking over, like for
Mhm.
them, that's what role playing gaming is, as
Mhm.
opposed to like older versions.
Right.
So is it something that people who are even younger now and coming into it now, do they prefer newer versions because that's all they know, or because something else in the generation makes them prefer that sort of mechanic?
Mhm.
And like
Yeah.
a situation where like, well, maybe if they only saw 1E games played, then they would be interested in that style. Or is it something more intrinsic to their generation and just the types of games? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I guess it's a big question, but I think with the current generation, I think we are moving slightly towards VTubers for tabletop role playing, because we still have what's it called, Dimension 20, and
Hmm.
Critical Role is still big,
Yeah.
but I think there is going to be a new generation of celebrities from the VTubing world, at least, because they don't only play video games; they can also collab and play tabletop RPGs, and that's because a lot of tabletop role playing game is really about spending time with your friends. It's spending time with
Yeah.
interesting people and finding ways to entertain each other. I guess this is why D&D has quite a lot of edge, because it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere, but it's uh, it's also losing a lot of goodwill nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, Wizards of the Coast clearly has a certain direction in mind, which doesn't seem to include a lot of its long-term players.
right.
Um, so that's unfortunate. But I had a
Yeah,
point and it suddenly slipped my
yeah.
mind.
Okay, yeah. All right. Until you can remember, I think it is safe to say is that a lot of the tabletop role playing game, it's really vibe and
Mhm.
community based. You need to really build a community, a group of people who are willing to share or play with each other and that sort of stuff. Because um, uh, almost all tabletop role playing game uh, have quite complex system if you're looking at it from a layperson's point of view. It's a matter of how much are they willing to learn for their friends. I think the social component is really important. Even though I do
Mm, that's a good
make
point.
CBA really easy to pick up, but in the end, it's like, who are they learning this game for, or to which friends are they learning this for? Yeah, and
Yeah.
what they can get out of learning this game. Because in CBA, I push further towards wish fulfillment rather than simulationists, so
Hmm.
that even though there are certain life forms that they can choose, we also always ask an open-ended question. For example, if you're a Paracelian, the goo sort of like person, what would be your color, or what color combination you have? Is it like gonna be purple and yellow like Slurpee or something? So it just we're trying to push them to imagine what they are, rather than telling them this is what it's like. You have to conform to this idea. Mm. And I
Hmm.
think, yeah, even with your horror, it would it would be really interesting to see what sort of like gory horror stuff they can add, what the players can add to it, because it's also a bit of a open conversation with the players on what do they think is really horrific. Because we do usually people do have different opinions on the same thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of the what was that called? The It was going around a few years ago, the consent form.
All
Um,
right.
but I think I've never hated that form, but I always kind of use it in the reverse way,
Mhm.
where I think it's something that DMs should be using to judge appropriateness of the
Mhm.
players for whatever sort of a game you're trying to run.
Mhm.
Like if I'm running, if somebody says they have arachnophobia, but I'm
Mhm.
running Raid the Spider Temple campaign
Mhm.
setting,
Right.
then that might not be the game for them. But
Mhm.
I do think that even surveying people uh, as you're playing or before you start, to figure out those kind of things, like what is the most horrific for them,
Mhm.
um, because there's infinite. Um, the one sort of problem I would say with Call of Cthulhu versus like a D&D setting. D&D, you're more or less free to use any kind of horror you want. Body horror, you know, zombies, classic monsters, if that's creepy, you know, psychopathic serial killers, whatever fits the bill. Whereas like Call of Cthulhu is kind of like pegged. There's only certain limits to the styles of horror. I think that play well with it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In general, I do think that D&D is very flexible, very flexible. You can do a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
Perhaps the thing is, uh, with with a lot of horror, sometimes the helplessness is a big component of horror,
Yes.
and it's sometimes uh, with D&D, if you some take away their chance to use certain functions or certain abilities that seems to be normal in a normal game, the players would feel kind of cheated. So I guess it's trying to find a balance. Maybe create
Yeah.
a horror monster where the players are still allowed to have all their abilities, but still remain scary on top of these quasi superhero like characters. I think that's the art of creating horrors for D&D. It might maybe a bit more. It takes a bit more work.
Yeah, I think you're right. And sort of smart play that goes along with that. So like we were
Mhm.
talking about the dream realm mechanic before. Well, one of the consequences could be, you know, you're not getting that long rest.
Mhm.
So you're not able to recover all of your hit points or spells or abilities or whatnot. Um, which sort of puts the player on the back foot, which, you know, for some people, they're not going to be happy with
Right. Yeah.
not getting everything back right away.
Right.
So you know that is definitely a consideration to um, you know, the type of temperament it would take to play this game.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and there are famous. It's a shame the Dungeon Delver's not here, but there are famous classic campaign guides where the people who wrote it were just like, okay, this spell's gone, that spell's gone, that spell's gone, because they were just tired of you know, like people fireballing a whole room or like
Yeah.
uh, easily defeating the purpose. But
Mhm.
I definitely take your meaning. Um, so if people want to find Cloudbreaker Alliance, where can they go?
All right. I guess you can just Google Cloudbreaker Alliance, and you can find digital copies of Cloudbreaker Alliance on itch.io and also Drive-Through RPG.
Ah, very nice. And your now you have a Discord server which I have joined. Is it still open for everyone, or is it only for backers? Or
Oh, it's open for
if
everyone.
okay,
Right.
so yeah, everyone, if you're interested in trying to play Cloud Breakers Alliance, every week there are sort of arranged times and arranged games where you can meet up with other people who play or who want to play and see if you like the game. Um, so it is getting close to 1 a.m. and I am about ready to fall out of my chair. So I think we're gonna have to draw this stream to a close. Thanks everyone for watching. If you haven't backed Empire: The Undying Sun, uh, go for it. You don't have anything to lose. It's going to be a fun experience, a lot of value, and something that you can definitely replay over and over. So the link is in the description. So CJ, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having
Appreciate
me.
hanging out with us and giving us definitely a different perspective on gaming and, you know, mechanics, and for telling us about Cloudbreaker Alliance. Yeah, I am a lightweight. But thanks everyone for coming back. Empire of the Undying Sun. Go check out Cloudbreaker, and I'll be back soon.